We're continuing to cover what appears to be a mass purge of law enforcement personnel at the Justice Department and the FBI tonight. We've obtained one of the termination letters that tonight was sent to Justice Department prosecutors. This one was hand-delivered to Assistant U.S. Attorney Sean Brennan. He was hired by the Justice Department in 2023, specifically to work on the huge glut of January 6 rioter cases. This is from the letter that he received tonight. Quote, "Dear Mr. Brennan, this letter serves to advise you of the department's decision to terminate your appointment as an assistant U.S. attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia and from the Federal Service. Effective upon receipt of this letter, this decision is based upon your actions in the prosecution of persons relating to the events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Your hiring has hindered the ability of acting U.S. Attorney Ed Martin to staff his office in furtherance of his obligation to faithfully implement the agenda that the American people elected President Trump to execute. Therefore, this is notice of my final decision to terminate your appointment and to remove you from federal service." Joining us now is Sean Brennan, an assistant U.S. attorney who worked on January 6 prosecutions, who has just tonight been fired from the Justice Department. Mr. Brennan, I appreciate you being willing to come here and talk to us tonight on what I'm sure is kind of a surreal and traumatizing evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Rachel.
What's been your history at the Justice Department up until tonight?
So as you mentioned, I was hired to join the Justice Department in September 2023 as part of a group of assistant U.S. attorney, AUSA hires who were specifically brought on to investigate and prosecute the crimes that occurred at and around the Capitol on January 6, 2021. That has been basically my bread and butter every day for the past close to a year and a half, watching videos, filing motions in court, going to trial to try to hold people accountable for the crimes that occurred that day.
This letter that we've obtained says it was delivered to you via hand delivery. Do you mind if I ask you who handed it to you tonight?
Well, I can't say for sure whether it was hand delivered because at least in terms of my receipt of it, it came at, according to my email receipt, 7:14 p.m. I was no longer in the office at that time because at that point I functionally knew I was terminated at about 4:55 p.m. today. The interim U.S. Attorney, Ed Martin, sent an email to the entirety of the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C., not specifically announcing terminations, but announcing a preservation or litigation hold, which many of your viewers may be familiar with. Whenever there is the threat of pending litigation, members of the company are instructed not to destroy any documents. However, when we read the memo that was attached to that litigation hold, it became clear that the litigation in question related to prosecutors who had been hired by the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute the crimes that occurred at the Capitol on January 6th. And in fact, that memo that was just randomly included as an attachment in that 4:55 p.m. Friday email included instructions from the higher-ups in the Department of Justice to terminate those employees, which included me. However, as you have mentioned throughout this evening, this is an unfolding story because that memo also says that the names of the employees to be fired are included on an attachment A to that letter. Thus far, I have not seen that attachment A. Many of my colleagues have not seen attachment A. I know there has been furious back and forth with the various group chats and conversations with my coworkers of people trying to figure out whether or not they still have a job.
The implication of the litigation hold is that you are going to be prosecuted, or that you're going to be criminally investigated, or there's some, if you're no longer a Justice Department employee, they're firing you from the federal service, but they're also telling you that records need to be retained. Are they? How do you read that? How do you take that?
I'm not going to sit here and say for sure that it means that there are plans to criminally prosecute those who investigated and prosecuted the January 6th offenses, but it does at least imply that there's going to be some investigation, and we've seen that already. That investigation could be criminal, it could be civil, or it could just be internal. This past Monday, interim U.S. Attorney Martin issued an email to the entire office stating as much. He said that there would be an internal investigation into our office and specifically the January 6th prosecutors' charging decisions with respect to charging certain violators, or rather certain January 6th defendants with violations of 18 U.S. Code 1512, which is the statute that the Supreme Court ultimately ruled in United States versus Fisher, or rather Fisher versus United States, did not apply to the January 6th riots. So we know there's at least some amount of investigation ongoing. Whether or not that is criminal, civil, or merely internal, I can't say.
Sean Brennan, until this evening, I'm tempted to call you an assistant U.S. attorney. I guess until this evening, it's hard to know. This appears to be a purge at both the FBI and at the Justice Department, but as you describe it appears to be one that is been carried out in a sort of typically shambolic and disorganized fashion, so that people who are subject to it aren't even exactly sure what's just happened. Mr. Brennan, I'm sorry for the treatment that you've received tonight, and I thank you for your service to our country, and I thank you for talking to us about it tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Rachel. I think, it's a tough night, but all of us who have spent the past year or more prosecuting these cases wouldn't change a thing and have no regrets.
God bless you. Thank you, Sean Brennan. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in now Democratic U.S. Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, a member of the Judiciary Committee. Senator Welch, I thank you for staying up late and being with us here tonight on what is turning into a very dramatic and hard to follow evening in Washington in terms of what's happening. I know you've been able to hear some of our coverage thus far. Can you update us on anything else that you understand about what's happening at the FBI and the Justice Department, in addition to the reporting that we've been conveying?
Well, I heard it all from Sean. I mean, this is astonishing. You have a president who has pardoned all the lawbreakers, and now he's firing the law enforcers. And that purge is going to intensify. I would characterize the first 11 days of the Trump administration with two words. One is lawless, and the second is cruel. And what the Trump administration is trying to do is rewrite history. January 6th happened. It was the Stop the Steal movement that was led by Donald Trump. And he got elected, and Lord knows how, but he did. And now he's using the awesome power of the presidency to try to rewrite that history, first by pardoning everyone, and now with this extraordinary purge at the Justice Department. And then, in addition to that, he's showing an enormous amount of lawlessness by firing inspector generals who have to get at least 30 days notice, and thanks to Senator Grassley, Congress has to be informed. He just disregarded the TikTok ban, which the president is supposed to enforce, not waive. And of course, what you're seeing with this impoundment is that he's created havoc for so many people all around the country, including in Vermont, homeless shelters for kids where they don't know if they can get access to their funds, domestic violence shelters. And that's happening, by the way, all around the country. So that's the cruelty of this as well as the lawlessness of this.
Senator, yesterday, it feels like it was years ago, but it was yesterday, Kash Patel had his confirmation hearing to become director of the FBI. You questioned him. When he was asked whether FBI agents would be protected from political retribution, whether there'd be mass firings of FBI officials and FBI agents who were involved with the Trump cases, he told the Judiciary Committee all FBI employees would be protected against political retribution. He actually said no one would be terminated for case assignments. He claimed to have no knowledge of a purge within the FBI. He pledged that if people were going to be removed at the FBI, they'd follow typical procedures within the FBI, wherein people have to be referred in case of potential misconduct for investigation by the Inspector General. Those claims by Mr. Patel seem like they're on a completely different planet than what we are watching happening tonight at the FBI. What do you make of that, given that his confirmation is still pending?
Well, I made two things of it. One, whatever he said had no impact on the accelerated approach that Trump took, whether he needed to wait for Patel or not. This is the president's actions that were enforced very quickly. Second, one of the things that was interesting about Bondi and Patel on the basic question, who won the 2020 election. They gave the sanitized, Trump-approved answer that President Biden was the president, not that he won. So what they have done, where they have this responsibility to the Constitution, not just to a president, is indicated by that answer that their loyalty is to the president. And it's a president who we're seeing is going to use all the power he has, legal or not, to exact retribution in his effort to rewrite the history of his culpability for January 6th.
Does this fundamentally change who we are as a country if FBI and Justice Department prosecutors, FBI officials and Justice Department prosecutors have now had their careers threatened and in some cases ended, specifically because they worked on lawful cases that didn't please the president? Have we already sort of crossed a Rubicon in terms of who we are as a country and what the rule of law is in the United States of America?
Absolutely, that's what's happening. I mean, the cruelty of it is this wonderfully young prosecutor, idealistic, is gone, right? The second thing is that it's clear that it's, quote, my Justice Department, as the president called it. That brings us back to the days when it was J. Edgar Hoover, but instead of J. Edgar Hoover going after Martin Luther King or even the John Birch Society for political reasons, it's Donald Trump doing it to use the Justice Department or the FBI to exact retribution or pursue political enemies. But I gotta say, there is a responsibility that we have in the United States Senate as an independent institution to cry foul here. And I really am hoping that my Republican colleagues, who many of whom I have great respect for, see that this is no game anymore. I mean, what the president did with this impoundment, he has no authority to do. What he's doing with purging of the FBI, it's showing that he is deadly serious. And I think there was a lot of wishful thinking on a lot of folks that the Trump agenda would be different than it was. But he's made it clear, lawlessness and cruelty, he will use both of those to take care of his need for retribution, but also to privilege the Elon Musk of the world. And there's only a few of them, but those are the ones who are in charge. And by the way, there was an Elon Musk SpaceX person over there at the Justice Department. And is he going to be looking over Kash Patel's shoulder in the purge?
Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, thank you very much for your time tonight, sir. I really appreciate you joining us on short notice as we continue to cover this developing story. I want to turn now to another big story that broke today in the Washington Post, and it actually relates to what Senator Welch was just saying there. We're still in the early hours of understanding what this means, but I think this may end up being a very big deal. Today, the Post broke news that the highest-ranking career official at Treasury, a man named David Liebrick, is leaving the U.S. government, quote, after a clash with allies of billionaire Elon Musk over access to sensitive payment systems. So Elon Musk and his team of people have reportedly been asking Treasury for access to the payment systems that the government uses to pay its bills, to pay out trillions of dollars a year across the federal government, also payments to businesses and individual households. So if you're a federal worker, before your paycheck hits your bank account, it goes through this system. Same thing if you get a Social Security check or a Medicare benefit. Payments to government contractors, tax refunds, grant recipients. You get the idea. This is basically the government's checkbook at the Treasury Department, how they pay for everything. It's so sensitive that only a few career officials actually have access to use this system. But according to the Post today, Elon Musk and his team have demanded access to it as well, which led to a dispute with a very high-ranking career official at Treasury who's now quit over this dispute, who's now resigned. The Post says it is unclear what exactly Elon Musk's team wanted to do, why they wanted access to this incredibly sensitive system. One former Treasury Department official tells the Post, quote, this payment system has never been used in a way to execute a partisan agenda. You have to really put bad intentions in place for that to be the case. I do not know enough about what this payment system does or how it works to understand the implication of it potentially being misused. But I will tell you, I've been watching enough of these red flags in the last 11 days to recognize that this is a very big one. And if the people in control of this very sensitive, very highly restricted system now do have bad intentions for what they're going to do with it, what does that mean? What is the scope of what they could do? Joining us now is Washington Post senior White House reporter Isaac Arnstorff, who's one of the reporters who broke this story. He's also the author of Finish What We Started, the MAGA Movement's Ground War to End Democracy. Mr. Arnstorff, thanks very much for being here. I know it's a really, really busy night. Let me start by asking you what kind of information, what kind of system this is, this payment system.
Well, what you said is exactly right, Rachel. This is the checkbook. This is how the government's bills get paid. And David Liebrick, as the most senior official in the Treasury Department, who was the acting Treasury Secretary until Trump's nominee was confirmed, is the expert at managing it, including managing the debt ceiling, which, as we know, is coming up really, really soon with the spending limit in danger of being breached. That is all, he's the expert on that. That's his expertise. All the payments to this is how the government pays its bills, and it's never been anything that has any political role. And Liebrick is a professional. He's worked there for many decades and through both administrations. And this isn't something that they're just making the payments that Congress authorized and that the government obligated.
And Isaac, I'll tell you, the reason I wanted to talk to you tonight, even though this is a very busy night and a lot's going on, is because I'm really spooked by the quote from the former Treasury official who says, seems to be really raising the alarms that somebody with bad intentions who wanted to use this payment system for partisan reasons could do something very alarming, that's something that we should really worry about. And it would seem Mr. Liebrick resigning, given all the different presidents he served, would also seem to be raising that red flag even higher, that this is something dangerous. What do you think the stakes are in terms of the misuse of this system that you're describing?
Well, my understanding is that this dispute between him and the Doe's representative was that he wanted to know what they wanted to do with the system, and not trying to be uncooperative, but how could he be helpful? And that led to them putting him on administrative leave, and rather than that, he decided to retire. But we are still working to figure out what exactly they have in mind with trying to get access to the payment system, and if they're going to succeed in doing so. But obviously, this comes in the backdrop of what Trump appointed Elon Musk and the Doge